just gone 9:30, so I think we'll get the meeting underway. So a warm welcome to everyone, particularly elected members and staff, and those from the business unit, Nathan, and maybe others coming. Housekeeping, this meeting is being live streamed. Okay, well, no, I think we go to apologies. Do we have any apologies? Appears not. Confirmation of order of businesses as on the agenda run sheet. Interest, the declarations of interest. Appears not. Public forum, there is no public forum. So confirmation of the minutes of the 17th of May 24. Would someone like to move? Move Councillor Courtney, seconded Councillor Walker. Any discussion? All those in favour? Councillor Walker.
Do they have that little staff amendment, attendance amendment?
I think the ladies are going to sort that out.
Thank you.
So thank you. It was just noted that Andrew Stevens was present, but he was actually wasn't here. No apology. So that's so all those in favour will say aye. Aye. Against, carried. So we'll move to the first item on the agenda, which is the Nelson Tasman Regional Landfill Business Unit General Manager update. Nathan, pages 9 to 128, councillors.
Thank you. Through the chair, this was the period to the end of the last end of the financial year last year, 30th of June. It was quite a busy period for us. We were involved in not only running the landfill, but also essentially tailing down the existing landfill management contractors' actions and spooling up for the new contract. The new contract started on the 1st of July. So during the period of time, we basically had to set up the temporary transfer facility, which is now up and running. We also had a slip on the site that we were actively managing. But overall, everything ran reasonably well over the period. There are other projects that were going on, such as some geotechnical works in Gullies 2 and 3, looking at the earthquakes and other things in anticipation of a potential application for resource consent for a regional landfill, if that were the way that we choose to go. So trying to get information about what's going on in the geotechnically. In terms of budgets, the landfill, it followed the path that we had from the previous quarters that we ran to a deficit for the end of the year, which was projected in the previous meetings. In terms of health and safety, we had one significant incident. There was no injury as a result of that incident, but an excavator overturned at the Eves Valley landfill when it was working on a vegetation control activity. There was some damage to the excavator, but there was no damage to any personnel. There was an investigation undertaken by the company. All work was stopped immediately after that incident until such time as it had been investigated. And it was thought by the company that part of the root cause might have been an operator that didn't have sufficient experience on the machine. So when the work recommenced, that was with a much larger machine and with a completely different operating crew to do that activity. So it was a disappointing for us in terms of all of the documentation and the pre-works and all that. All of that stuff had been done, but unfortunately the skill base, let's say, of the operator may not have been as good as it could have been. There were a number of other minor incidents. As one staff member got a small injury as a result of a trailer hitch, getting his hand squashed or his arm squashed between the trailer hitch and the jockey wheel. So there was a toolbox and a set of actions in regard to parking the vehicles so that they wouldn't have that occur again. We did have two non-compliance events. So we received two discharge consent infringement notices for sediment discharge to York Stream. which is really disappointing. One of them occurred as a result of the dosing pumps on the system getting blocked during a rainfall event. So we had done a vegetation control exercise, mowing and gorse clearance, etc. And in the rainfall event, a lot of that vegetation that was in the stormwater channels got carried down into the pump and got stuck in the pump screens and blocked the pumps up. And the second one occurred when we have an independent party comes around and does water sampling on the stream, and our operations manager opened the valve to get a sample when we weren't actually discharging. So when he opened the valve to get a sample, we essentially discharged water into the stream, which we shouldn't have done. And it was just a misunderstanding on our part. But fortunately, we breached the rules. So that's something we've learned from. In terms of the operations and maintenance contract, the previous contractor is now off site. The new contractor is on site. The landfill compactor, the new compactor is in and running. It's done a really good job. So our compaction has, so this is not the last period. This is the new period. Has moved from around 0.8 tonnes per cubic metre to about 0.94 is the estimate at the present time. So that's a significant improvement in the density of waste, and that's obviously worth a lot of money.
Chair, Officer Nathan, do you want questions as you go through? Or?
I'm happy to have questions as we go through. Yes.
I think, we'll just let Nathan finish the section on operations and maintenance and take questions there.
You just had a few come into my mind as he was going through, and I thought, I'll forget that later on. Yeah, okay.
So the other thing that's occurred is that the temporary transfer facility is now in use, and it's had some really good outcomes. One of the key outcomes for all the waste companies is that the turnaround time on site is reduced significantly. So some of the contractors are suggesting that they're getting an extra full load in a day. So they're saving potentially an hour of time on a day, which is worth a lot of money to the region in terms of lost time or productivity. And we also reduced the amount of mud that we're carrying around the site, and obviously improved safety by having a much more controlled tipping zone. So pretty happy with the outcome on that.
Councillor Courtney, you had a question.
Well, I just want some clarity, actually. Well, have you finished, Nathan?
On that piece,
section,
yeah.
Yeah. I would just went over 3.7.
Sorry, Councillor, can you just
Thank you. You went over 3.7, I think it was, on page 11, and I didn't quite understand that. I wanted a bit more clarity around that. 3.7.
Okay.
You talk about instability, geotechnical instability. You mentioned on the land behind the landfill, and then you mentioned the south side, and down towards the bottom of that paragraph, you mentioned I think it was the eastern side. So I was
okay,
the back side, west side, eastern side, and I thought, where on earth are we going with this?
Yeah, so the landfill, we refer to that corner of the landfill as the southeastern corner. And so when we talk about the southern benches, which is actually on the southeast of the landfill, and the southern benches is a section of hill that we still need to bench. It's not been worked fully. So as part of the buttress project last year, we borrowed material from around the landfill and built the big dam at the base, or the buttress at the base of the landfill. And one of the areas we borrowed material from was on the southern or the southeastern side of the landfill, in the benches. And when we did that, the geotechnical engineers were comfortable with the actions that we had taken. Subsequently, there was a large rainfall event, and an earth, a slip started activating in that area. So we've now, refilled a piece of that area and are awaiting a new, essentially a resolution or a earthworks plan to resolve all of that. That area appears to have some underlying, layers of mudstone which allow it to be unstable, which weren't previously known to exist. So, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Thank you.
Please, thank you. Can I go on with another one?
Yes.
6.2 and 6.3. Now, look, this is a good news story, isn't it, Officer Nathan?
Yes.
A really good news story. The new Tana E520 compactor commenced operation, and it's compacting from 78 tonnes per square metre to around 94 tonnes per square metre. And the results of that are quite outstanding. Could significantly mean an increase in return for us in the form of revenue by 70 million in 2024 promptly, 2025. And that tells us, doesn't it, that investing in technology and plant and equipment does have payback, doesn't it?
Yeah,
There's a lesson here, isn't there?
Oh, I think it's certainly a good outcome. Absolutely. It's a good story. The numbers you refer to are not quite correct. So it got 0.78 tonnes per cubic metre.
0.78, is it?
0.94 tonnes per cubic metre, not 74 to 94, but it's still a very significant increase.
Mm-hmm.
And also that the $70 million worth of airspace that will essentially create is over the life of the landfill at the current, it's calculated on the basis of our current rates. So each year we would get a portion of that, in terms of notionally of saving. But ultimately what it does is it allows us to potentially extend the life of the landfill for longer.
3 years.
As much as 3 years potentially, yeah. So obviously that's, good from a capital expenditure perspective, for the future. Yeah.
Do we class that as a productivity gain?
It would definitely be a productivity gain. The issue we have at the landfill is that we don't value airspace. So we don't have it's not an asset on our balance sheet. We value airspace based on the cost amount it costs us to produce the airspace. And so, while I'd say that's worth 70 million, that's the amount of waste we could dispose in that waste, in that hole, or the additional volume over the life of the landfill at current fees. It's not the value that we would attribute to it on our balance sheet in any way. And so it's a little bit of a distinction in the way that the valuations are done in the business unit.
Well, we're certainly pulling our weight because Nelson is just so behind, 20% behind the rest of the country when it comes to productivity. So, I mean, we're starting to move.
We're doing our share.
We're being better at putting waste in the ground. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Walker, did you indicate you had a question?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, the chair. Nathan, I'm looking at page 12, 3.11, and there was an emerging matter with regards to some variations. Without reading out that whole
Yeah, I can see.
paragraph, do we have any further updates on where that's landed or not?
At the moment, that's sitting with the engineer to the contract. So we've assessed, we've had a party assess of the claims, and then we've essentially said that we didn't feel that they were valid. We have then said, responded to that effect. The contractor can take it to the engineer for a determination. So sitting with the engineer, I don't know where it'll go. We don't know what the time frame is, but it should occur in the relatively near future, the next month or two, that there would be a determination on what the outcome would be.
Thank you. Carry on with the report if you like, Nathan.
Okay.
We're at the
So really into projects now. We had a successful year. The buttress project was completed. There's just rats and mice to tidy up now in terms of a little bit of stabilisation work to get fully established and various very small items. So that project was our big project last year. Thereabouts $6 million, and it was completed within the year. So we're pretty happy with the outcome. There's a couple of projects that didn't get completed. The Hale facility at Eves Valley didn't get completed, and we had some, let's say, some complications during the year in terms of other stuff that came in. That being said, we are intending to open Eves Valley for accepting Class 3 material. That's on the 1st of October. So we will have the facility running. There is more work to be done on that facility. There's another consent to be got for increasing the airspace associated with it, but the facility was intending to be up and running on the 1st of October. It'll only run by appointment, so it's not going to be open and manned every day. So In terms of other things, we were delayed with the gas system at Eves Valley again. There's some uncertainty around gas flows that's starting to be resolved now, so we can start moving forward again. And the battery bin project, I know the chair will be interested in. We have now redesigned the battery bins. We're scheduled to do another trial on the battery bins in late September to trialing out the new fire suppression system. So keen to get that one resolved. The first trials went really well. However, the fire suppression system didn't put out the fires inside the bins. It contained the fire, and but it didn't put them out. So. All right. In terms of odours and stuff, we had one odour notification during the period. It was during the previous contractors' period where they were shifting some waste that put in the wrong spot around. So that's resolved, and it's not. We don't think it'll occur again. The stormwater infringement notices that we had, obviously, I talked about that before, and there's been no litter and complaints or anything during the period. In terms of gas management, we've been ongoing successful capture and destruction of gas over the period, so that's good. And there's work going on into the business case and market research, etc., for the renewable CNG system as the concept levels now. So, in terms of our ETS position, we're in a good space. Andrew, if he was here, would be able to give you more details on all that, but it's reasonably. We've still got a bunch of ETS credits that we could sell if we thought it was appropriate. We don't think it's appropriate because the government settings are not clear exactly yet. In terms of our waste minimisation activities, we've been obviously the battery diversion stuff that we're working on. We've been supporting the councils in regard to the joint waste minimisation and management plan. And we've also, one of the things that we're quite keen on implementing effectively is the new contract has an incentive system in it for the diversion of waste from the landfill. That isn't working particularly effectively yet because the contract is only just getting his feet under the desk properly, but hopefully it'll start ramping up over the next 3-4 months as he understands that and gets up to speed with the job properly. There is one thing that in this report that's significant, and it's a bit of a mea culpa moment. When we put the current business plan, the 24-25 business plan together, we were looking at waste minimisation and management activities as part of that, and we were trying to encourage the reuse of waste, in particular sawdust and other waste that we thought might be able to be diverted to other activities. And we looked at those wastes, and then we assessed the amount of airspace that those wastes use, because they're low density compared to normal waste, and then decided we would, in order to encourage the reuse of those wastes or the diversion from landfill, we put the price up. And we doubled the price in the previous, in this current year, the price was doubled for those wastes that we thought could be, they're organic waste, they're ETS producing wastes, they might be able to be sent to another location or used for something else. Unfortunately, it turns out that rather than getting diverted, large contractors who have that waste may choose to take them much further distances to go to cheaper facilities because they can, and there might be other cheaper facilities, and those cheaper facilities might not do as good a job of collecting the emissions from the gas, or gas emissions from the waste, and also it would use more diesel to cart the waste to those facilities. So essentially I'm asking permission from the board to reconsider that fee for the light waste, essentially the sawdust wastes, from the $510 a tonne number that we've had to a $375 number. The reason for $375 is I've gone and looked at and talked to transportation companies and the likes and tried to understand what it is that the costs would be to transport to other facilities, and then tried to make it at that level or slightly below so that we don't encourage what I see as a perverse outcome, trucking waste to somewhere else where it's less effective containment. So essentially that's one of the requests in this is approval to change that fee. I'm more than happy to take any questions in relation to that one now, if you'd like to.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea. In fact, I have one myself. Just in relation to light waste, I always thought that was stuff like polystyrene and stuff like that. I'd never really thought about sawdust as being light waste, but because it's quite bulky.
It's very bulky, yeah.
Yeah.
So we have two fees. We have a polystyrene fee, and polystyrene, it's very, very, very bulky and very light. And we never, almost never get polystyrene into the landfill as a load. I have seen a skip in the past come in, and I've gone and asked the driver whether he's registered it as a light load, and he said, no, it's not a light load. I'm like, it's polystyrene on your skip. And he said, no, it's not a light load. I mixed it myself. Right? So the rules were being manipulated to to try to work within that. So one of the things that we've done in the 24-25 business plan is to redefine what light loads are. And light loads are essentially 25% or more of a particular material that, in the opinion of the landfill operators or the general, the landfill business unit staff, constitute a light load. So it's a fairly broad consideration. We wouldn't be applying that willy-nilly, but the intent is that actually if you are bringing in, or you're deliberately manipulating the rules to say, well, we're bringing in a little bit of something else mixed with light material, then we would be calling it light material. Sawdust definitely is less dense than general waste. And when you compact it down, you can't compact it down to the same level. So hence the reason why we think it's justified to charge more for that. It's also a high ETS producing, material. So
going forward, are you happy that we leave the resolution till we consider the free?
Yes, at the same time.
At the same time.
As long as you guys are happy that you've questioned me at
Is there
length
any
enough.
further questions related to that, or so Nathan covered it off well enough? Councillor Courtney.
From a financial point of view, it's still viable.
Yeah, it's not material to the business unit, and the reason is we assumed that the 512 tonne cost would have driven sawdust from the landfill, and we wouldn't be getting that cost. I.e., it would have been going for another use. So we didn't assume that we were getting a lot of revenue from that. So if anything, it would be slightly beneficial because we would get revenue from something we had assumed we wouldn't get revenue from. So I don't think it's negative in any way.
I think it's relatively straightforward. So
Go back to another.
yes,
This is the one I thought of earlier on page 12. It was to do with that health and safety section there. We mentioned the overturning of the compactor. And in that area, you mentioned, the cause of the accident was the operator training was not standard. But then you went on to say, what were the... you went on and asked, told us that procedural improvements were recommended to the operator.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm curious to know what those procedural improvements, those recommendations to the contractor were.
So one of the things that we noticed in the investigation reports was that there was no documentation of the daily the meeting at the beginning of the day. There was no documentation that they were doing around those aspects in their safety planning. There were safety plans that are put in place. They appeared to be slightly more procedural plans rather than specific. At the staff on the site, and those ones that we couldn't tell from the documentation whether an effective toolbox meeting, an effective risk mitigation mechanism had occurred. The paperwork was all in place for what would happen and the procedures and stuff, but we couldn't see that stuff on the toolbox meetings, etc., on the site because they weren't documented effectively. So procedurally, we were asking questions around how they were doing those procedures, whether they were, looking at risks on the site at the time rather than looking at them solely from a office-based risk assessment. My contract and sustainability engineer has dug into that quite deeply, and sent those, our observations back to the company for that as well. So.
Training for the operator of the compactor is a really major issue for a new contractor, So
this isn't the current contractor on our site. So the new contract. This is another. So I don't. When we talk about this, we don't refer to a contractor, and specifically our current contractor on the site is not the contractor that was dealing with this. This was essentially a contractor doing a separate activity managing vegetation at the Eves Valley landfill, not the operations
not
and maintenance contractor. It was a separate contractor too, and not the one that we've got on our current site. No.
Right. Well, that's pleasing to hear.
Sorry.
No, all good. I think you're up to 17, Nathan, landfill waste volumes.
Yeah, so the trend over the last few years is for waste volumes to be reducing. That we don't know exactly whether that's good management or change in economic times. I think I personally have there's probably a bit of both in there. We have developed a little bit of some extra airspace during the year. So we, as part of our the buttress construction, we obviously benched out sections of the landfill and removed material from the eastern side of the landfill, and that's created additional 35,000 cubic metres of airspace. So again, we can't value that on the balance sheet. It doesn't have a value, but it creates the better part of half a year of airspace in terms of capacity. I've added in a few things about risk management and risks that we might consider. So it came from a comment that one of the board members on the Nelson Regional Sewerage Business Unit board member asked me to talk about some of our risks each time in our board meeting. I thought it was a good idea. So the three that I've focused on today were obviously a reporting compliance risk. The Ministry for Environment has changed the reporting rules. Our Weighbridge software was not set up to do the reporting that way. As part of the recent, as the end of last year, we implemented a program to get that there. It hadn't finished at the end of the year. So we're meant to start reporting that on the 1st of July. We've manually done that activity during July, but now the Weighbridge is up and running as of 1st of August. It started running with the new categorisation and all those factors. So there was a risk at the time that we would have an issue with the Weighbridge upgrade, and that we might lose data or not have the right data. That does not seem to be a case now. We obviously have the landslide or the slip risk in the rear of the landfill, and that area has historically been unstable. So we are obviously working on that, and we want to overcome that through essentially an activity of work, removing that material and benching it to the right way to the geotechnical design that we get sent back. And stormwater management has been one that it's been an ongoing. We spent quite a bit of money a few years ago upgrading the system. It's actually a reasonably good system. We've had a few issues with it. There's a few minor tweaks and a new erosion sediment control plan that we've now had signed off from Nelson City Council, and we're hoping that over the next short while it will be very effective. We won't have these issues again with the blockage of the pump. So back down to finances. End of year finances, they followed the trend that we on the previous quarters. We ended the year with a deficit of 537,000 compared to a budgeted deficit of 91,000. A large portion of the costs associated with that deficit came in the last month or the last quarter, and those related to the transfer facility construction, or the temporary one because it's an operational cost, to some airspace. There's a bunch of airspace gains that were done at the last area, and then obviously the slip wmanagement activities that were operationally cost. They're not capitalised. I'm happy to answer questions in regard to that. But on balance, then the year was, or the period was a good period.
Just one from myself, Dave. Just your comment around the transfer system and the cost there. Is that all pretty much done, or is there still more work and cost to be incurred there?
So what we've done is we've built essentially a big concrete pad on the surface with netting and the stuff around it. It's considered temporary, and the reason it's considered temporary is because it's sitting on the landfill surface. We will end up only being able to use it for 18 months. We did that in order to get that activity in place for the safety aspects that are coming on. And then there is a whole program of work to design the permanent facility to sit in Gully 2 beside the landfill. So it's not sitting on the surface of the landfill. So we now have a low cost facility. Cost will cost us money, sitting on the landfill surface that we can use for the next 18 months while we get the design, and the permanent facility constructed, essentially. So that's why it's an operational cost. It's not capitalised because it's not lasting a long time.
I understand that. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you, through Chair. It's great to see that we're now reporting on this risk management. I guess for me, it's around the continuing to mitigate as many of those risk factors. It's good to have identified some of them, and I'm just hoping that what's here is reflective in the budgets that we're using. And how often will this risk management framework be tabled? And if there was something that leaked out, what is the process on getting it prioritised on that report?
So for the Chair, the intent is to try to focus on 3 significant risks each board report. So if we've talked about these ones, I wouldn't generally expect to be talking about them again unless there was something changed. We would go on to some other, perceived risks. I mean, I wouldn't go too low. There's no reason why I talk to you about operational risks that are minor. But we're talking about trying to maintain it as strategic or a significant, something that might influence the joint committee or the activities in a material way. And so I intend to try to add that section for every report going forward about some relevant risk that might be at the time, or it might be a much longer term strategic risk.
Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Stallard?
Thank you, Chair Bryant. I just have a few. Firstly, the temporary transfer facility, that seems to be going well. Could you just remind us how long is this, like a trial, and what's the intention from there? Will there be a decision point about whether to continue with that setup?
Yeah, through the Chair, in the first month of that facility really demonstrated its value to us. I mean, it's not an inexpensive process. So what we are doing is we are double handling waste. We're doing that intentionally and knowing that it will cost us more money. But we're doing that in order to ensure that the traffic management on the site is very well controlled. So there are no machines going to interact with each other in an uncontrolled manner. Or, that very few vehicles go to the tip head and need to discharge at the tip head. And then the benefits obviously are a big safety benefit, but they have resulted in a massive increase in, or reduction, as the case actually is, in turnaround times on site. So trucks come in, they go up, they tip their load, and they leave. And so from a customer perspective, it's a significant improvement. From an environmental perspective, it's also a significant improvement. We're not carrying mud around the system. We're not. The litter control is very good. There's a bunch of other pieces in there. Would I consider that we should use this in the future? Yes, the answer is yes. This process that we're doing is definitely demonstrating that the way we're now managing waste is definitely improved from a safety and an environmental perspective. It does, and I outlined it before, it does cost us more. It will continue to cost us more. The idea of this facility was to trial whether or not that facility worked, whether or not we could maintain the flow of waste and whether we could keep up with the incoming flow of waste, how we would manage the flow of waste in such a way that we allowed the landfill compactor to achieve the best compaction rate for waste. So one of the problems we've had historically is, in the morning at 8 a.m. when the landfill opens, there might be 8 or 10 trucks sitting there waiting to come in. So they come in a big hurry, they all dump their load, and then the compactor tries to compact them in order to keep up, and doesn't necessarily compact the waste that well. And so this facility basically allows them to tip all of that material onto the tipping floor, and then we transfer it from that tipping floor to the landfill tip head, and then put it in at the rate that we want to put it in. And that essentially it disconnects the rate of waste going into the tip head from the rate that the trucks come in through the gate. And that again, I think, is part of the reason that we're getting this significant increase, in density. That obviously the new compactor also has a significant impact on that.
Thank you. And just to follow up, so do you have in mind a decision, a period of time at which you'll let the trial continue and then you'll make a decision whether to make it permanent, or at this stage we're still just going with the temporary? And
no, the intent is when I come back from holiday, that we will sit down and start working on a concept for a permanent facility, and that permanent facility will need to be developed. We have to look into the safety and design elements of that. We have to look into culture and climate aspects of this facility, which is part of our safety, culture and climate thing that we're trying to put in place. And then we also need to then look at how that facility accommodates the different types of vehicles, because one of the things we can do is do something similar to what we've got at the moment, which is all waste tips on the pad. Or we can do a facility that says only waste out of small trucks tips on the pad, and the transfer stations from Tasman and Nelson come in hook bins, and can we actually separately deal with those hook bins rather than dumping them? We just actually have our own vehicle that takes them. Then that facility might be able to be a lot smaller under that scenario. So there's quite a bit of work in and around the concept stuff that we have to still do to refine how the final facility would look like. One of the things we'd like to do is, and one of the things I'm going to do when I come back from my holiday, I'm going to be in Wellington. My wife's at a conference. I'm going to go and have a look at a bunch of transfer stations and landfills in the lower North Island. I'm a geek about this sort of thing, so I'm keen to understand what they do and how some of the ideas that they've implemented might be able to be applied to our facility. And it might be that we need to do more of that, in order to understand what best practice has been around the country. Well, my previous experience down and looking at these things suggested that this facility, and specifically the Cape Valley facility, was the best system, which was all waste was essentially transshipped and dropped on site. The bins were taken back out and it was transshipped. So it kept all of those vehicles away from any of the dangerous activities. And for us, it's a little bit more difficult because not all of our waste comes in the same type of containers.
thanks for that. And one more point, if I may. This is not specifically for Nathan. Item 9 around the deed of agreement in terms of reference. I just think this would be something to have a bit of discussion on as a joint committee. It's got an interesting background, and I sent some questions through during the week, so thank you, Officer Levertis, for answering those. This was obviously, from talking to the chair of the joint committee in the previous term, an important piece of work that will make a material difference and something that's needed. So it's been 2 years since this joint committee passed resolutions for those revised documents to be received by each council independently and approved. And I gather it happened fairly quickly at NCC. And over the 2 years, it hasn't gotten to the governance board at TDC. So now there's some discussion about whether sort of the overall context of those changes has evolved to a degree that we should pause and try and incorporate new material into those documents. The other option, I guess, is that we say that might be a different work stream, that the work that went into these documents last term should be locked in and adopted, and we take on those new terms of reference and deed of agreement, and then the bigger picture stuff, we look at it as a separate work stream. So just interested to hear the thoughts of colleagues on that, because I'm not sure that has come back to the elected member level in those 2 years. And perhaps it has, perhaps it hasn't. But I think it's after 2 years, it would be good to get some views from elected members about our thoughts on that issue.
Yeah, happy to try and answer that comment.
Through the chair, I'll handle those questions if they come up, but I think Councillor Stella had asked for comments from his colleagues, so we'll wait in here before I, if needed, answer.
Okay.
I think it should be handled expeditiously by our officers. I think 2.5 years I had down in my memory tells me 2.5 years. Now this is not good. We're running a business, a couple of big businesses here, and they've got to have these foundation documents on which to perform on and report on. So no, I'd be very happy to chair if you or I or any other member around the table would be prepared to move a motion asking for this matter to be handled expeditiously without delay. I just feel it's just got to the point where it's inexcusable. Because I do have a recollection, and you referenced it, Councillor Stella, the previous chair of this committee, yes, was working on it continually at the end there to get some movement, but was unsuccessful. So no, that's my position.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. No, I think the position is, and Alec will comment perhaps, we have been doing some work recently on this to try and progress this. Alex, do you want to comment any further on that?
Thank you, through the chair. So I think this has taken a wee while, and we can't move from the fact that it's been 2 years, and 2 years has been a long time. I want to give the committee assurances that the existing terms of references that we are working to does not inhibit or prohibit in any way the ability of this committee to undertake business. I need to be very clear about that. It does not. I need to point out that the changes that were made that NCC passed and TDC haven't, and I'll make no criticism of my TDC colleagues. They have been working on this, and life takes over. We have weather events, and we have a whole lot of other things. But because of the urgency of this, and because we're still able to transact business, that has gone a little bit slower. But I do accept that that loop needs to be closed. But I do make the point. Though, that the changes that were made to the terms of reference were, by and large, the majority of them were aligning operational delivery dates with the NRSBU. That was, in the main, those changes. The fact that those don't line up exactly still doesn't detract from the fact that Nathan, for example, still delivers the business plans, the activity management plans, the reports, the financial reports to each council in a diligent manner. I do think, based on that, my advice would be that this additional work that is required be incorporated, and we do this work once. I think the work to get this through, because unfortunately there are some minor cleanups that would need to be done. It's going to take staff time. We would need to run through that process, and I ask for the committee's indulgence that we do this once, we do it right, and we bring this back to the committee on the basis that the current terms of reference do not prohibit the ability of this committee to undertake business. So I offer that. Clearly, you're within your right to ask for this, and that'll have to go to the TDC's chief executive in terms of how fast this moves forward. But I really need to give you assurances. I think this has gone on a little bit too long, but it is not imperative, and we can wait to incorporate all of these. That's the only thing I can offer.
Okay, Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you, through Chair. I endorse what my colleagues on my right have said. When I sat here last term, we definitely had a lot of energy, momentum, and a lot of resources were gone in by the chair of the day. And I'm grieved that it's taken this long and we still don't have anything signed. To me, it's an understatement to say it's taken a bit long. It's taken phenomenally too long. And I think it's very paramount that we get this sorted and we get a line in the sand where our terms of reference is actually signed and sorted. And I take the assurance from you from across the room, Alex, that it's not hindering us as a business unit moving forward. I do have some questions around that. However, I'll take those offline.
Yeah, Councillor Sterling.
Thank you, Chair Bright, and thank you, Officer Levetis, for that response and information. I do think that some of the changes in the terms of reference, and I accept that this joint committee can still, function fine in the meantime. But I think the benefits to be gained from those revised documents are such that we need a clear path. To my mind, it's if there are minor changes, let's do them and get it approved, and that will mean it will have to come back to NCC, I gather, to approve the amended version. But I would not at all support a further substantial delay over some bigger picture issues that need to be incorporated. So I give the same guidance as my colleagues here, and I guess the way forward is simply elected members, driving it through at TDC. So thanks for your time on that.
Anything further? I think we continue down the path we're on. As I say, we've had meetings recently at the TDC, NCC, and our officer and chairs level. Was both chairs, wasn't it? Yes, it was.
The chair, of course, yes.
So I think we just continued working that path as promptly as we can. And with that, is there anything further questions relating to the report, or is Councillor Sterling?
Thank you, Chair Bright. It's in the conclusions 21.3. We're talking about delays to the gas reuse program. Are there any more details that are able to be provided at this stage?
Sorry. Yeah, so at the gas reuse, there's a couple of different things going on in the gas reuse actions. One is obviously the negotiations with the hospital haven't concluded. We actually haven't, or I haven't heard back from them recently. And secondly, we haven't resolved fully, but we're getting close to it, the change in concentration and and flow that occurred at Eves Valley over the summer, and that slowed us down in the implementation of the Eves Valley facility. So we have carried on with the works in terms of the concept for the renewable CNG facility. We've got some market work going on in and around that, but we do need to implement some actions for Eves Valley, and we need to implement, when we get the resolution of that gas flowing and quality data that is being accrued at the moment. And that we think that the principal issue was a very dry summer and the capping of the landfill cracking, and we're obviously got to look at what we can do to mitigate that. So we're essentially pulling more air into the landfill during that period over the dry summer.
All right, so just a follow-up to clarify. So the problem with Eves Valley might have been that the system wasn't intact, so we were losing methane and air was coming in as well.
Yeah, essentially losing some methane in some areas where we weren't having enough negative pressure, and getting more air around the wells where there was negative pressure. So yeah, that's our current conclusion. Yeah.
So in one landfill, the air is hugely valuable, and the other, it can be a pain.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
That's one way to look at it. Anything further on the landfill, the update report, Councillor Courtney?
Yes, I think, can I go back to the hospital? you're negotiating with them. What period of time have you spent on that aspect?
So we started discussions about 2 years ago when we were buying this facility and finishing off the purchase of the facility. At the time, we started talking about the sale of the boiler to the hospital, and then this committee approved the sale of the boiler to the hospital in a previous meeting. And if the hospital, we've chosen not to action that until such time as we understand what the ongoing use of gas would be. And at the moment, we probably now been 9-10 months in the negotiation process with the DHB specifically about this contract of, the sale and purchase.
Can I follow up with a couple more questions? Can we supply the quantity of gas that they require? Can we offer them continuity of supply? That's the main question.
Yes, the answer is yes. We have enough gas to supply all of their current needs.
And they understand that?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah, well, I believe so. Yeah.
I've been looking into this quite deeply because here again, the time is ticking by, if you don't mind me saying so again. Well, I'm not apologising for asking this because, how long? 2 years on this one. Well, that's got to come to some finality as well. That has got to come to some finality as well. This is revenue coming in. And it's the crux of the whole issue. So I want to know, does the hospital have things like different special burners or something that...
Yeah, through the chair, there are 3 boilers at the hospital. There are 2 that are owned by the DHB or Health New Zealand, and there's one that's owned by NTRBU. The one owned by NTRBU has a gas burner with a backup diesel system. We don't use the backup diesel system; it's not connected. But the intent of the overarching negotiations that we've started and with the hospital were to essentially the intent was for us to provide them with a secure supply,
Yes.
which had a bunch of redundancies in it. We knew that we couldn't get it to what we call an importance level 4 because we couldn't protect the pipeline from the landfill to the hospital sufficiently to achieve importance level 4. The hospital didn't seem to think that was important, but the intent of that was to put in a diesel backup supply, so that if we were selling them gas and something went wrong with the pipe, then there would be a backup supply of diesel on site that they could use. The negotiations were intended to take us from the current style of contract, which is essentially we only give you gas if we've got gas. Style of contract. There was no penalties. There was no liabilities associated with that. To a much more commercial style of contract, where we had an obligation to supply, in order to justify the hospital's investment and/or continuity with us. And we also looked at trying to understand or to support the hospital by having a long-term contract. So we're talking about a 10-year contract. So and that would be only CPI indexed. So they'd know what the fuel cost would be for 10 years, subject to CPI. Whereas most sales, energy contracts are a 3-year contract. So during a 10-year period, you might negotiate it 2 or 3 times. And you wouldn't necessarily know what the price of it would be in 3 years' time. So that was the generic intent. The reason we actually approached the hospital for this, because to do these negotiations and try and get this in place, because the hospital's contract with us ends in May 2026. So there is no contract following May 2026 with us. That is the end of the current contract. And so we wanted to secure for ourselves a clear understanding of what that future might hold. And obviously that we do think that the hospital would like to ensure that they know what their future holds in energy supply as well. Yeah.
If you indulge me, Mr. Chair, does our biogas contain 30 to 40% carbon dioxide?
Yeah, so our biogas is usually somewhere around 57 or 58% methane and about 41 or 42, maybe 43% CO2.
And is that acceptable to the hospital?
Absolutely.
They can,
Yeah, it's run. I mean, most boiler systems will run to around about 40-something% methane. So basically what happens when you put it into the boiler, you mix air in with it, and you would in that scenario you'd mix a little bit less air in with it to get the fuel mixture correct.
so the quality of gas that we're offering them,
Is
the standard is
suitable.
it's acceptable to them?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
It's been used for the last 15 years. So
Right.
Councillor, excuse me, Councillor Stalin.
Thank you. Just briefly, but I take it then we sell them this mixed gas. We're only the amount they're paying is just the methane, so it's not like they're paying a normal rate for someone else, but it's less. So
no, we don't sell by the cubic meter. We sell by the amount of energy. And in actual fact, at the moment, we don't even sell by the cubic meter. We sell tons of steam to the hospital at the present time. We sell from our boiler a certain amount of steam that they buy that steam from us. What we would like to do is move to selling gas and not own the boiler, and essentially the DHB to own the boiler and manage that, and essentially go to a much clearer facility. Part of the complexity of the conversation that we have is the fact that if we own one boiler and we sell steam, and they own a separate boiler and we sell gas, it makes the accounting for the gas and the sales much more complex. So it would be much tidier for everybody to just have one unit, which is gas.
And just to follow up, appreciating that negotiations are ongoing and they'll be confidential largely. What more can you tell us about prospects? For are you close? How long might it be? What are upcoming deadlines where it starts to become a problem?
I can't answer. I have, I had a meeting on the 26th of June with the DHB where I asserted our position. I have contacted them twice in the meantime. During that meeting on the 26th of June, they indicated that they needed to go and get additional information to support their considerations, and I haven't heard back from them at this stage on those considerations. I have heard that it's no longer in the hands of the local people; it's now in the hands of Health New Zealand, national, or
Councillor Courtney.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, so the sticking point, let's be blunt, is price. You've ticked off everything else on my list. So the sticking point is price.
I'm just wary that might be commercially sensitive. That might be.
I won't go there.
Yeah.
But I'm just determining that is the sticking point. That's what we've got to
currently,
work our way through.
Yeah, currently we haven't agreed a price. Yes.
All right. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Anything further on the general manager's update? If not, is someone prepared to move that we receive that? And the resolution 2 around the light-based and the activity management plan you get to speak to, aren't you?
Oh, yeah, I haven't spoken to that. So, there's an administrative step, basically. The activity management plan, what has been submitted as a draft to yourselves, you've approved it to go to the councils for their review, and they've reviewed it, brought it back. It's been consulted on as part of the LTP process. There was no changes as a result of that, and part of that, one of the resolutions was that we then send it back to councils for adoption. And essentially, this here is the administrative aspect. Please approve that it can go back to councils for adoption.
Thank you. Someone prepared to move? Move Councillor Walker.
Yeah, happy to move.
Seconded Councillor Courtney. Any further discussion? All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Against? Resolution is carried. Thank you. Do you want to break for tea or carry on? Carry on a little bit further, shall we? So we're up to the carryover report, Nathan.
Yes, through the chair, this is
129 to 134.
This is again relatively, it's clearly up to you guys to choose whether you choose to carry over the money or not. It's I see it as administrative. We've done some of our activities. We had a successful year in our capital works program. We got the front buttress project completed. We had 2 projects that were delayed through the year, and as a result, we didn't fully expend that money, and we'd like to carry that money over to the next year to continue those works. Those two projects principally were the gas management Eves Valley and the hail, or the contaminated soil management facility. In the table and below 4.6, there's the capital full budget, which was 9.45 million. There was a carryover from 2023 to 2024 of 695,000. And so that gave us combined capital and renewals total of 10.16 million. We spent the 7.25 million of the capital from the year. We spent the full amount of the carryover from 2023-24 on the buttress, and it leaves us 2.21 million of money that we need to carry over to the 25-26. The 24-25 year, actually. So, yeah. So essentially bringing it into this year's budgets, essentially.
24-25, isn't it?
Correct, yeah.
Thank you, Nathan. Any questions?
Happy to move when it comes to
Happy
that.
to move. Do we have a seconder? Seconded Councillor. Move Councillor Stallard. Seconded Councillor Courtney. Any further discussion on the resolution? If not, I'll put that. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Against. Resolution is carried. If we now move on to the business unit draft business plan, 135 to 166, Nathan.
Yeah, through the chair, this is the draft business plan that we need to prepare each year. The terms of reference and deed agreement require us to have a plan in front of the councils by a certain date. I think it was the 31st of October. This is the last opportunity for you guys to consider it for that date. So I've had to prepare it now. It's always a bit of a projection based on a lot of, forward thinking in terms of preparing a business plan for what is, more than a year away when I'm preparing it. In the plan, what we've done I've added a few things and changed a few minor things around. The principal things are in the capital program. So I've asked for an extra $500,000 in relation to hospital works for implementing some of the redundancy activities on the backup support aspects for supplying gas to the hospital, on the assumption that process is successful. And I've asked to bring forward $1 million of the 12 out of the $12 million in the 26-27 budget into the 25-26 year, so that we can continue to develop that pre-work for the renewable CNG system slightly earlier. So it's just a refinement essentially of the gas implementation plan. Most other things in a capital sense are the same. There is a change in operating cost, so the operating costs do go up. The Ministry for Environment has increased the Ministry for Environment waste levy from $60 a tonne to $65 a tonne in 2025-2026. And so we've included that into our budgets, and we've also had to include some additional interest charges and some debt servicing charges associated with funding of the payments and the depreciation, etc. So overall, we're asking for another $11, I think, a tonne on the fees. I need to look at the specifics. It's been a while since I prepared that. Yes, it's $11 additional per tonne. That what does that do? That's essentially a 6% increase. When we prepared the AMP, it's compared to the AMP. So I'm only the AMP is not an indexed, so it doesn't include inflation and other things. So in the time between when we prepared the AMP and now, when this would go in, we're making the assessment that would have been 8.1% increase. So we're below what that inflationary pressure might have been, despite the fact of having that additional $5 cost. So am I happy? It's still a lot of money. It's still within the normal range of landfills of our size within the country, but it does increase the cost to the consumer in Nelson, which isn't ideal.
Just a question around, did I read yesterday where there's further changes to the local disposal levy?
Yes, every year from now for the next 3 years, there's an extra $5 a tonne fee occurring and being increased. So in the 26-27 year, it would be $70 a tonne, and the 27-28 year, it would be $75 a tonne. So that's, the central government is putting the price up by another $5 per.
And what was the philosophy behind the $5 per tonne? Was it, I think it broadened out what it could be used for, was that correct?
Yes, it did. It broadened out what it can be used for. Historically, it was a fund that was, it sent money back to local government entities to use. And it also had a contestable fund for projects, waste minimisation or management projects. I haven't studied it in lots of detail, but my understanding is that they can also now use it to run the ministry, essentially as a fund to support their own internal activities. So that does, I can't guarantee that that's a good description of it, but that's the sort of my understanding of how it works. So this money won't necessarily come back solely to waste management or to local government anymore, the way it historically was always encapsulated.
Thank you, Councillor Walker, then Councillor Stanley.
Yeah, thank you through you, Chair. I guess, this, it's all going to be about the messaging that we send out to our users, because I assure you there will be limited appetite from any of them for the increase. And it's all, the Chair, and no disrespect, I mean, it was good that you asked about what that $5 actually meant. How do we share that with our community? Because again, this is something that we're powerless to make any changes on. We're the ones that are made to enforce this piece of change. So I guess for this team as the business unit, how do we message that and prepare our community for the fact that we've not long ago put prices up? Here we are about to go out again, and then annually from here on in, it's just going to continue to increase. And I guess my concern is the impact on our environment, the impact on the fact that fly tipping and other ways of people are mitigating their rubbish and their problems onto the wider community. Do we have a plan on how we're messaging it?
Specifically, no. Generically, we would be looking at trying to, tell the story about why. The other aspect that we haven't talked about is that the AMP didn't anticipate continually ongoing increases in price. Now, it didn't anticipate the government putting the MFE levy up either. But one of the things that the AMP anticipated was that as we implemented more gas activities and more, we're using them as essentially a revenue source, that those would start to mitigate some of the other costs that were occurring by being a more commercial activity. So part of the reason for the renewable CNG system is that we were looking at trying to create a revenue stream of a significant revenue stream from the sale of gas within the region. I mean, it would also be good from an emission perspective, but it, it was about trying to mitigate the cost to the community for waste disposal. Now, in the past, we've had this conversation previously, and essentially the message that we are getting from central government is that they would like us to put the price up. Clearly, they're putting the price up, so they want us to put the price up. We infer from that message that they are trying to put the price up to discourage waste generation. But we don't know that that's necessarily the entirety of that message that we're getting, but that's the inference that they're making. So we are essentially propagating that message to our consumers. Now, rightly or wrongly, I'm happy to take direction on how we might do that.
Thank you. Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chair Bryant. Just a couple of questions, but firstly a quick follow-up on the waste disposal levy and the $5 increases each year. Has there been any talk about changes to the proportions of where it goes? Because the status quo has been about 50% back to councils on a pro rata basis or per head of population, about 50% to the contestable fund. Is that
through the Chair? I'd have to defer to the council staff on that, and they might have more idea about that.
So at this stage, there's nothing signalled from central government in terms of how that waste disposal levy will be changed. And I think that's your question, Councillor, as I understand it. So currently it comes back, as you correctly said, based on proportionality, and it's about 50%. And I don't think there's any change that I know of offhand that's going to change that at this moment in time.
Thank you. And I guess that has implications because that money can only be used for waste minimisation and management. So it's something to consider for our budgeting. If I heard you correctly, Nathan, at the start when you're talking about carrying over, you're talking about some costs with ensuring redundancy for the gas supply to the hospital. So I wonder if you could just briefly summarise. I heard you earlier again saying there'd be a diesel backup for the gas. Who's paying for the redundancy and that infrastructure? Is it us or is it the hospital?
Yeah, so the intent of the contract, I mean, I need to be a little bit careful about getting into commercial sensitivity stuff. The intent of the contract is that the NTRLBU would fund and install the backup equipment, but it would charge the hospital for that funding. Essentially, we would recoup the money as a separate charge to the hospital for that activity. So we would install additional equipment and power supplies and gas storage and other things that to enable us to provide them a secure gas stream, and that funding, which we generically agreed with them, would be returned to us with essentially a capital charge additional to the sale of gas.
Thank you. And just, if I may, been good to hear your thoughts. I mean, obviously that emissions trading scheme is important for the landfill, and we're sitting on a huge excess of units. And you've mentioned repeatedly that really isn't clear direction from the government about that. And then some commentators would say, well, it's being set at a level that just encourages offsets through forestry and not much more. Any further insight into where we might be heading with the ETS pricing? And
yeah, I'm a little bit weary of we could sell. I'm a little bit weary of selling some credits. I think that I'm weary of it because some of the emission auctions have failed. A number of them failed in previous years, and that basically takes out a chunk of emission from the market. And I don't know that we've seen the effect of the reduced amount of emission credits that are available in the market from that. And we haven't seen the effect of what happens. That doesn't it's just there's a lot of uncertainty still, and one of the benefits of us holding the credits is that we are insulated from any uncertainty for a prolonged period. So we now, whether the price goes up or down, we know what our price for those credits will be. And then that gives us certainty for the next, 10 years or more about what that will be. It doesn't necessarily result in the correct incentives. That's a question that the board might consider. If we know what our costs are and we hold ETS credits and they're all worth, $43.50 on average, then it's not necessarily providing a pricing signal to our consumers to reduce waste. But it is quite a significant arm's length action to expect that ETS price influencing the price of waste at the gate would actually influence their waste choices. So I think there's much more influence from central government levies and the likes than there is from an ETS fee. So I'm at the present time, my position would be let's not sell until we get a bit more certainty, and then I would then look at whether or not we could hold until the price was a good price to then sell if we chose to.
Alec, did you want to comment further?
Through the chair, not specifically on that item. I just want to point out to the committee that what the resolution is to approve this to go to the two councils for comment, and that those comments will come back. So I understand that I don't know what each of the councils will come back, but we talk about the increase in fees and messaging. This is a stage in the process. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it's got a couple of iterations to come back, and the next stage is to go to the two councils for comment, and I don't know what the two councils will comment back.
Thank you. Anything further, Councillor Stanley?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Courtney.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Following on from Councillor Stallard, Nathan, you had any dialogue at all with the coalition government or representatives from them on this ETS?
No,
No.
I haven't.
Nothing at all?
No.
No.
I mean, we get messaging and agenda that everybody gets messaging, but I get the standard emails as an operator of a facility, but I haven't gone and advocated to them or asked them.
Yeah.
There has been consultation documents that come out in terms of how how they're going to continue to assess ETS in relation to waste. So I mean, that's one of the problems we've had is each year they've changed the rules in regard to waste and what they consider the baseline. So that and some of those changes have affected not only the current year, but also the landfill back to its inception. And so what that means is that sometimes those changes can be quite material. As we're quite in a privileged position in the fact that we are doing a very good job of collecting the gas. So our exposure to those changes is relatively low. But I have heard from other landfill operators that this year's changes will mean that they will pay substantively more ETS emission charges because their gas capture isn't as good as ours. So that essentially it drives their charges up significantly. So
it's a wait and see game.
That's where I am at the moment. Yeah, truthfully, I don't expect it to change in the next 3 to 6 months. I think we'll be in the same situation in 3 months' time, or we'll be saying we'll wait and see.
Thank you.
Right, with that, is someone prepared to move the resolutions on page whatever or on the screen?
I take it that everybody's gone through the document and the business plan document itself, which goes through to page
Page
160 something.
Yeah, 166. Yeah.
Well, obviously, it's a replication in a large way for a lot of the different pieces that we do each year. It includes the business improvement and the performance and long-term objectives, etc. So, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Are you indicating you want to speak?
Oh, yeah, I'd like to just ask a question, if I may, and then happy to move it. On page 151, I see there through you, Chair, the draft NTRLBU master plan. Can you give me some feed on what that is? I think it's quite exciting to think that we're actually getting a master plan. Are you able to share any on that? Thanks.
This is carryover from the last year that I've done is when I joined, I tried to look forward and see what the business unit does and how it does it, and then try and project forward a long time. And in this particular case, we have outlined that we want to put some sort of long-term plan, or in this case, a long-term vision for what the landfill would do and how it would do it into the future. It won't necessarily say a bunch of actions, but it would look at risk and other things. So it's one of the things that as I've been looking at. I've done the similar thing for NRSBU last year, and I'm trying to stagger them. So that was in the June 25 was when we were saying we were going to do that by. But I mean, it's not something that's required by the Local Government Act. It's not, it's something that I think is sensible, because I like to try and have a long-term goal, and so that I can work towards it, and I understand the steps that we should be putting in place to get towards that. So,
yeah, I recommend that. Thank you for the mahi that you're putting in on it.
And you're happy to move? Do we have a seconder? Councillor Courtney, any further discussion, comments? If not, I'll put the resolutions. All those in favour will say aye. Aye. Against? Resolution is carried. We move now to the annual report. Nathan, please. Can councillors page 167 through to 215.
Yeah, through the chair. Again, this is a reflection on what we've done over the year, and the things that have gone well and not gone so well. It then compares our successes against, so the report following the board report, successes against our KPIs and the likes. And we've had a good year. We've had a couple of not so good elements in the year. The two the suspended solid discharges and the infringement notice, we got them a key not so goods. And we clearly need to improve on that in the coming year. Financially, it was an okay year. We budgeted for a deficit. We got slightly larger deficit than we intended, but we were, the revenue was within 0.6% of our projections, which I thought was pretty close. And our deficit was, well within the 5% margin that I hold, as a necessary thing for success. So overall, I'm relatively comfortable with where we were overall. I mean, we did have a successful year in regards to the buttress construction. We got that done, and I'm really, happy that there has now meant that the landfill is now above the required stability criteria for a maximum credible earthquake over a 500-year period. So we can be proud that our landfill is now in the position where I believe it should be from a safety perspective. So there's a table on page 179 that talks to that in terms of different leachate levels and different factors of safety. And we achieve those factors of safety under all circumstances. So, I mean, that's a good outcome from that buttress project. What else? I mean, I think we've clearly got a bunch of activities that have been going on. We've got a bunch of activities that are still going on. So we've achieved a number of the improvements, such as the temporary transfer facility, the new operator on site. We have a landfill that is something we can be proud of. We don't have many litter complaints. We don't have many odour complaints. We've had these 2 events on the stormwater, which we need to improve. But overall, I'm really comfortable that we are in a good position. So I'm more than happy to take any questions in relation to the land.
Thank you, and well done for the year. Councillor Corby.
Yes, I just want to say, Nathan, I think you've had an excellent year. I really do. You've got on top of safety, which is incredibly important. You took it as your primary interest. You were going to, get control of it and stay in control of it, and you've done that successfully throughout the year. Recruitment too has been a drag throughout other years, and you've got on top of that now, and that just must be so encouraging for you to progress into this coming year. And capital works as well. No, 80% I think I read in there. That's capital works.
Yeah.
Well, I think under the circumstances of shortage of, personnel and one thing another over that period to achieve that is excellent. I want to understand 3.7 on page 168. Just explain that to me. The revenue waste disposal was at 0.6% of budget, with the waste deposited decreasing from 76 tonnes, 76,000 tonnes.
Sorry, yeah,
to 74,240. Now, what's brought that about?
Okay, sorry. Well spotted. It should have had tons sitting after it, but anyway, well spotted. When we do our budgets, we have to project forward a certain amount of waste coming into the landfill, and we base our budgets on that certain amount of waste. And then last year we projected forward. We assumed that the market would decrease. Our crystal ball, yes, the crystal ball we do each. That the waste would reduce somewhat from the previous year. So in 2021-22, we had 81,000 tonnes of waste come in the gate. Then we had 76,000 tonnes come in the gate in the 22-23 year. And we projected forward, and I think we said 74,200 or something like that tonnes. I can't remember the specific number.
76, I think.
I know. That was the previous year. Oh, no, we were projecting forward. I can't remember the specific number. I have to look at the details. And the actual number of waste that came in was 74,240 tonnes, and we were within 0.6% of that, projecting forward. So the projection was that we were reducing, that the waste would come in, and it was based principally on the fact that we thought that the market would continue to decrease and we would see a reduction in waste coming through the gate over that period of time as well. So there's a bunch of activities that we do, and I'm quite happy with that one. I was pretty close.
But I thought I'd take it on.
Yeah.
I think the other thing to remember is that you've had to do these things across two sites, both York and Eves Valley, so it's quite an achievement. Like you've alluded to, the upgrade at Eves Valley will see us for considerable time in the future, and it's dare I say, a high standard of work. No, in the ear. Councillor Stalin.
Thank you, Chair Bryant. And yeah, first I'd like to thank Nathan and all your team for the work you've done to deliver what you have in the past year. I agree, it has been a success. And I think the things that I think have really, some of the things that contribute to that are, for example, holding those ETS units, the airspace work, the methane capture, the new operations contract and the new compactor. I think it just means when there are external changes, we're a bit ahead of the curve and we're buffered from them, and we can sort of ride with them. As you touched on, some other landfills throughout the country are not so much ahead of the curve, and when external changes occur, they're racing to catch up, where there are financial penalties and so on. So I think that's been a really great, and that shows management planning, I think. So, keep up that good work. I think that also leads us to some degree to what Councillor Walker commented on earlier, that this sort of longer term planning, acknowledging there are uncertainties we can't predict, but there'll be something on your mind, I'm sure. So I think if that sort of short to medium term buffering we have at the moment of getting ahead of the curve can be translated to the longer term, I think that's only got to be a bonus for the operations of the landfill. So keep up the good work.
Excellent. Anything further? Is someone prepared to move the resolutions? Councillor Stella, I'm happy to second. It's Councillor Bryant. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Against? Resolution is carried. I think now this might be a good time to have a break before we move into confidential. Do you want us to move to go in and then have a break? If we can do that, would someone like to move? We move. And then
If Rachel, if April says so, I'm happy to.
Yeah, I move
Yes,
Councillor Court.
Very happy.
Seconded Councillor.
Could I speak to it? Could I speak to it?
Favour will say aye. It's carried. So we'll have a tea for 15 minutes, then come